clutching her gown in her fist and looked around the room. The door opened, making her startle. She swiftly stood. Him entered the room and closed the door, staring at her with an intense gaze. Wine bit her lips and lowered her gaze. He closed the distance between them. "Welcome to my world, Mrs. Kim." He grabbed her jaw and lifted her face. Wine gulped hard while Kim leaned closer to her, their breath intertwining. "I hope you remember what you agreed upon in our contract." "I do." Her voice came out as a whisper. He stared at her with the emotions that Wine couldn't name. He rubbed his thumb over her lips. Wine slightly moved away his hand. "You're already resisting me. How will you give me an heir?" He spoke huskily. Wine stood still and gulped hard. "I'm sorry, I just..." He placed his index finger on her lips, cutting her off. "It's okay, I know you're nervous." He leaned and drilled soft kisses from her jaw to neck. Her heart thumped against her chest. She held his shirt in her fist, feeling the end of her hair on her nightstand when her phone rang, interrupting their moment. Ham pulled out and gestured for her to attend the call. Wine walked to the dressing table and picked up the phone with a smile, thinking it might be her mom, but her smile disappeared as soon as she saw Nathan's call ID. "Yes, Nathan," she spoke with a hint of nervousness. Then laid on the bed and narrowed his eyes at her. "What the hell have you done, Wine?" He spoke furiously from the other side. "You married that thing. You couldn't wait for me. Did I promise I'll find a way out of it?" Wine tightened her grip on her phone. "We'll talk about it later, Nathan," she said in a low tone, then placed his hands under his head. "Mobile phones should be on silent on wedding night, Mrs. Kim. We can't just let anyone interrupt our special night," he said loudly. Wine looked at him through the dressing mirror and passed him a glare while he shrugged his shoulders with a smile. "Bloody bastard. Wine, come out of there now. I'll come to pick you up," he said anxiously. Wine let out a sigh. "I can't come, Nathan. There's no coming back from this. I'll talk to you later. Take care," she muttered in a low tone and declined the call. "You're not going to talk to him again. Neither will you meet him," he warned her in a dark tone. Wine turned to him and walked closer to him. "You can't stop me from not meeting my friends. In our contract, it's clearly written we won't interfere in each other's personal life," she said, pointing her index finger at him. Kim's smirk widened. He stared at her amusedly. "Our contract also states that you will obey your husband. I told you to read it carefully, but you didn't." She clenched her jaw. He held her hand and pulled her towards him. One gasped as she landed on his chest. "Should we continue what we left?" He mumbled, caressing her cheek with the back of his hand. One lowered her gaze, trying hard to control her wild heart, and then switched their positions. The wine was lying beneath him nervously. He stared at her for a while and captured her lips in a soft kiss. Wine didn't resist, but she didn't respond either. Then pulled out, noticing her hesitation. "Go and change." He moved away from her, but Wine held his arm. "Continue what you were doing. Don't force yourself if you're not ready yet. We have a long time," he said in a soft tone. She shook her head in denial. "No, let's just get with it. The sooner I give birth, the earlier we'll get a divorce." Then gritted his teeth. Just a few hours ago they got married, and here she was talking about a divorce. "As you want. Stop me if you feel uncomfortable," he said in a serious tone, unbuttoning his shirt. Wine nodded with a thumping heart. The rest of the night Tam released every inch of her being from the depths of her body to the core of her soul. Few days later, Wine had always thought of Tam as rude, arrogant and aloof, but these days she realized he has a softer side as well. Just in a few days, Wine felt a lot comfortable and encouraged around him. motionless. He doesn't seem anything closer to it. In a state of trance, she leaned into his touch. A feminine voice broke her trance. "We got married." ____ couldn't understand if she was asking or casually saying. Wine turned to her when her eyes caught the sight of limping Mila. "Yes, this is Wine, my wife." He snaked his arm around her waist and pulled her closer. Mila glanced at Wine and spoke in a sickening sweet tone. "I'm Mila, thanks, X." She stretched out her hand. Wine felt a hand clutching her heart. She shook hands with Mila. "Really? How come I don't know him in X?" His icy cold gaze made Mila shiver. "Then how did I end up in your bed?" They knew she was bugging on the past to create a misunderstanding between them. "Stop lying, Mila. If I can break your one leg, believe me, I can disappear you from this world. And no one will know it." He muttered through a clenched jaw. While lowered her head, biting her lips and trying to understand why it hurt her that Them had a past with someone. She wasn't supposed to have any feelings for him. Just then Them dragged her away and sent a message on his phone. "Did you really hook up with her?" Her blunt question caught him off guard while Wine face palmed herself internally for asking such a question. It shouldn't matter whether he hooked up with her or not. They stared at her for a brief moment and spoke. "She had called me over to discuss something and spiked my drink. She tried to take advantage of me, but I gained consciousness." She nodded. "Why did you break her leg?" "As a punishment." "Not only her leg but also her hand," he said casually, shrugging his shoulders. Wine stared at him with disbelief. "I hope you don't have any misunderstanding. It doesn't concern me if you had a past with someone or not. We won't interfere in each other's personal lives." She spoke, staring behind him with sparkling eyes. He turned around and clenched his fist, seeing Nathan approaching Wine. He passed him a meaningful smile, then held Wine by the wrist. "My friends are waiting for us." He dragged her away without letting her speak. Nathan clenched his fist, staring at them intently. They both met Them's friends. Wine was immersed in conversation with their girlfriends and wives while Them was away with his friends. Wine excused herself, seeing Nathan in a corner, and walked towards him. "Hey Nathan, I'm sorry for earlier," she said as soon as she approached him. Nathan stared at her intensely. "Your husband would mind if he saw you with me here." Wine knew he was upset. He's quite possessive. "It's because of the contract. You know why I got married," she said in a low tone. I didn't expect you to marry him, and I did offer you my help. I could have protected your family as well. You went against your family and married that bastard." He spoke through gritted teeth. "Nathan, watch what you say. However we got married, he's my husband and I don't allow anyone to talk shit about him." She spoke furiously. Nathan shook his head with a bitter smile. "You're already defending him. What if you fell in love with him by the time your contract ends? Would you be able to leave your child to him after you feel him and hold him? Would you have the courage to see him address mom someone else rather than you?" Wine remained silent. He hit her weak spot. Why didn't she think about it earlier? "Terminate your contract, Wine. I'll protect you and your family in every way possible. There's no turning back, Nathan. I'll give him an ear, and he'll protect my family for the rest of my life." She spoke with her mind wandering elsewhere. Nathan clenched his jaw and let out a sigh. They were both silent when a voice grabbed their attention. "If it isn't the beautiful Wine." Wine turned to him. He was eyeing her head to toe with a disgusting smile. Nathan leaned on the chair lazily while Wine attempted to walk past Morante, but he held her wrist. "We haven't seen each other properly yet," he said with his same annoying smirk. Wine withdrew her wrist from his grip while Morante trailed the back of his hand from her jaw to neck and down to her cleavage, but Wine slapped him right on the face, taking him off guard, which he muttered, glaring at her. Before he could react, Wine picked up the glass of wine and splashed it on his face. "Stay within your limits." Morante clenched his jaw and raised his hand to hit her, but then caught his hand in air. "The audacity to raise your hand on my wife." With that, he twisted his hand and punched him thrice in a row, sending him to the ground. Nathan slipped away as soon as he saw the situation getting intense. "Stay away, Wine, don't get hurt." He pushed her away while Morante kicked him. The sudden commotion drew everyone's attention. Then pressed him against the wall and hit him constantly. Wine stared at them with horrified eyes. They were hitting each other. Morante pushed him and slid out a dagger from his pants. Wine looked around and picked up the bottle of wine before Morante could hit him. cupping her face. She shook her head in denial, holding his hands. I'm fine. The sound of gunshot startled her. Stay here, I'll be back, he said and slid out his gun. She held his hands with her trembling ones. No, don't go. My people and Arthur is in there. I can't leave them. Just stay here, I'll be back soon. She let her tears flow freely and shook her head in denial. Please don't go. She moved closer to him and tucked his shirt. He embraced her securely in his arms. Fine, I'm not going anywhere. He sat her on the chair near the pool. Let's stay here until they are done. She nodded, clutching his shirt in her fist and sniffing. What's wrong? He asked softly, stroking her hair. Brother was killed in a party, she mumbled. Something clicked into his mind, causing his eyes to turn dark. Nathan ran away and left you to Morante without caring about you. Stay cautious about him. Don't trust him so blindly, he said in a serious tone. That was when I realized that Nathan just ran away. Time skip. It's been a month since their wedding. After the party, Nathan called Wine and apologized to her, but he didn't explain it. Wine tried her best to avoid him these days. Today, Wine and him were going to her house as Wine's mommy still mad at her. Now she was ready and came to the sitting room where Arthur was seated with him and talking to him. When will be your coronation as Mafia King? Tim leaned on the couch lazily. Not until I have an heir. He rubbed his forehead while Wine cleared her throat, grabbing their attention. Hello, sister-in-law. He greeted her politely. You ready? He asked in a soft tone. Wine nodded while Arthur stared at him with surprise. Hugh, I don't remember you talking to a girl this softly. You surely love her madly. Wine's cheeks flushed red while Tim passed him a glare and stood. Get us from here, we need to go to Wine's house. Arthur laid on the couch. So carry on, I don't mind you going. By the way, sister-in-law, please give my brother a baby soon so that we can see his coronation. Tim picked up the cushion and threw it at his face. Do the work I have given you, get lost from here, he said in a stern tone. Your dad will throw you out if I tell him you are telling his beloved nephew to get lost, he said stubbornly. Tim shook his head, knowing it was just a waste of time to speak to him. He gestured for Wine to come along, leaving Arthur behind. They arrived at Wine's house. Wine's mind was wandering with different thoughts as she made her way in. They received a call and stopped there while Wine went inside with a pounding heart. Only, Sally exclaimed happily as soon as she saw her. Wine smiled through teary eyes while Sally rushed to hug her. Mrs. Chung sat rooted to her spot. Her eyes brimmed with tears, seeing her after a month, but she held back her tears. How are you? I'm good. She broke the hug and kissed her cheeks. Mom, she said in a quivering tone, and walked towards her. Mrs. Chung looked away. Wine sat on one knee and placed her hand on Mrs. Chung's knee. I know you're mad at me, but I can explain, she mumbled in a low tone. What are you going to explain? She looked at her furiously. That you basically sold yourself? Do you know what this contract marriage means? She pushed away Wine's hand. Wine cursed the moment she spoke to Nathan about the contract nonchalantly. Mom, let her speak at least. Go back to your room. Mrs. Chung passed her a glove. Sally walked away, biting her lips. Mom, I had no other way. We can't live with fear if we don't have strong back support. We lost brother, dad, 2 uncles and their families have been kidnapped thrice in a row. Rowan has been attacked. Sally is scared to step out. We can't lose anyone else. Her voice broke. Mrs. Chung's gaze softened. been 3 months since their wedding. Since the day Wine spent days in her mother's house, she realized life without him was extremely empty. She missed him so badly. When found out about her pregnancy, she was happier than ever. All this while she forgot that they were in a contract. The feeling of motherhood was overwhelming. These days Wine has been muddled up with her thoughts. She decided to talk to Them about the termination of contract. Neither could she leave Them nor her baby. Now she was reclining on the bed when Them entered the room. "How are you?" he asked, coming towards her and placing his hand on her forehead gently to check her temperature. "I'm good," she mumbled, sitting straight. "Should I bring you dinner?" "No, I don't have an appetite." "Did you eat?" he said in front of her. She nodded and leaned closer, resting her forehead on his shoulder. "I just feel too lazy and fatigued since this pregnancy," she mumbled. Them tangled his fingers in her hair. "Let's go to the hospital." He kissed her crown. She shook her head in denial and remained silent. He trailed his fingers softly in her hair. She leaned into his touch. After a few moments, Wine broke the silence. "Them," he hummed in response. "Can we terminate the contract? I can't leave our baby." Them's fingers stopped. Wine moved away and looked at his serious expression. "What about me?" She lowered her head and bit her lips. He lifted her chin and raised his brows. She stopped and let out a deep breath. "I can't leave either of you. I don't know when and how I have fallen for you," she mumbled in a low tone while tears streamed down her eyes. A wave of relief washed over him. He wiped her face, but the tears kept coming. "I know this is against our agreement, but I can't help it." "What are you crying for? You have no idea how I feel right now." He pulled her closer. She sniffed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Please don't leave me," she mumbled over his neck. "I'll never leave you. I didn't have any intention of going with the contract." She pulled out and looked at him. "If you had read the contract carefully, then you must have understood how shallow it was. I couldn't find any other way to stay close to you. My dad's condition of the year and your situation was an opportunity. I have been in love with you since the first day I saw you." She stared at him with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? And where did you see me for the first time? The way you looked at me was enough to let me know you didn't like me a bit. When you were in high school, I came with Ronan to pick you up." Wine chuckled and rested her head on his chest. "I thought you were rude and arrogant." He tightened his grip around her and hummed in response. "Anyways, I'm glad you fell for me." She lifted her face upward and stared at him. "I had to fall for you." She kissed his chin. He smiled, rubbing his thumb over her cheek. "I have to go on a mission next month," he said out of the blue. "What? Why?" She sat straight. "I'm the next mafia king, so I have to prove it. But it is still away, don't be stressed. Next month is just in a few days." "Is it necessary to go?" He nodded and kissed her forehead. "I'll be busy from tomorrow onwards. Wait for me until I return." He placed his hand on her arm. She nodded with teary eyes. "I love you." "I love you too." She kissed him on the cheek and buried her face in his neck. Time skip. It's been 3.5 months since Them had gone on a mission. Wine's desperate eyes longed to see him, but there was no trace of him. Even his parents and Arthur didn't know where he was. All this while they discovered Wine was pregnant with twins. They were happy but sad at the same time, as there was no news of him. Wine's condition was deteriorating, and a few days later she was rushed to the ER, leading to a premature delivery of the babies. The babies were in the hospital for a few days. Now Wine kissed the baby boy on his tiny forehead when the door opened behind her. "Mom, can you please change his clothes as well? I'm scared. He's too tiny." She spoke without looking back and placed the baby in the crib gently. "What happened?" She stopped as soon as she turned around. Then passed her a gloomy smile and walked towards her. "I'm back," he mumbled, moving closer to her and holding her hands. One stared at him with disbelief. "You?" Her throat went dry. He nodded, resting his hand on her cheek. "Yes," he mumbled through teary eyes and kissed her on the forehead. One swiftly pulled away, shaking her head in denial. "Stay away," she muttered as her eyes welled with tears. He frowned. "What happened, Wine?" He reached out to hold her when his eyes landed on the tiny baby. "My baby," he mumbled. Wine blocked his view. "No, he's just my baby." Tears slowly traced the path down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Wine. I know I should have been there for you, but I was stuck up with something." He encircled his arms around her waist and pulled her into a tight hug. Wine cried silently touched him on the chest. I missed everything. The last days of your pregnancy, the labor, everything. He whispered. She pulled out sniffing. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you when you needed me the most, he mumbled. Her gaze shifted to the wounds and scars on his face. Are there any other injuries? Did you get hurt? She asked anxiously. Then smiled and shook his head. I'm fine, he pecked her lips. Are you happy for your babies? He nodded and glanced at the crib. Yes, but I can't hold them, they're too tiny. Wayne chuckled while he leaned, hiding his face in her neck and inhaling her sea scent. I missed you so freaking much. He whispered over her ear and tightened his grip around her waist. Wayne intertwined her fingers in his hair. How did the mission go? She asked in a low tone. It was good. I found out who killed Ronan. His voice came out muffled. Who? Morante was behind your family's every murder and your kidnapping. He killed Ronan with the help of Nathan, and he also sent Milas to spy on me. Wayne's body trembled, then pulled out. Where are they now? Her voice shook. 6 feet under the ground. I made sure to chop 3 of them into pieces. As for Mila, I had broken her other leg as well on the night of that party. Thank you for brother's revenge. She cupped his face and pressed a long kiss on his lips. Then groaned as soon as she pulled out, causing her to chuckle. Ronan knew I liked you. He promised me he would get us married, but faith wasn't on his side. Wayne's face went gloomy. The door opened, grabbing their attention. Wayne, she's asleep. She stopped and gasped, seeing him who smiled widely. How are you, Mom? He kissed her on the cheek and hugged her. She's a girl? He asked, glancing at the baby girl. Mrs. Kim nodded and kissed him on the forehead while Tim leaned towards the little girl. Hey baby, your daddy is here. The little girl smiled in sleep, causing him to chuckle. How have you been? Wayne held the baby girl from Mrs. Kim and laid her in the